Yeah.
Welcome, 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 everyone, to the Women's Empower Network. I am so excited to have you here, and I'm really excited and grateful that Erika decided to stay up late all the way from Sweden to be with us. So, welcome, Erika.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, so, we always are really fascinated about everybody's story and journey that leads them to what they're doing today. So, if you could share a little bit about your story and what inspired you to do what you do.
Thank you. I will. Uh, to be, I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to adjust it. I'm
There
going to
you
start
go.
here. This is my Superman, but Superwoman shirt, and I thought it was quite appropriate to wear it today. As you can tell, I have a very British accent. And even though I was born in Stockholm, Sweden, English was sort of my first love, I would say. And I'm self-taught, so I could speak fluently. I could speak English fluently by the time I was 8. That's when I
Oh,
could
wow.
hold conversations and in English. And two things happened with learning that language. One was I could leave the very shy, introverted Erica and become another Erica that was more brave and perhaps also that could show sides to myself that I wasn't really able to show in Swedish for some reason. Or actually, the reason was my upbringing. I was born into a family with substance abuse and blah, 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 all of that jazz. And I don't really go very heavily into my background today. I've written a book about it. I've done interviews about it. That book is out in Swedish. It's out in English as well. I did the translations, but it laid the foundation for where I am today. So I didn't know it then, but today I realized that that kind of background has made me. I had two choices. I could either choose to become like all of my ancestors, my mother, her mother before that, and continue down a road of either being an aggressor to other people on the outside or swallow everything on the inside. So my maternal grandmother was a full-blown perfect narcissist, very beautiful, but she just projected everything onto everybody else. And then my mother, who was her firstborn, she became an alcoholic and she's still alive. We can't have any contact today because she still refuses to see that she has a problem with different types of substances, right? Um, so my healing, I would say, my healing journey started in earnest in 2004, so exactly 20 years today, when I was working as a lead female singer in musicals. I did my stage training in London, hence where I perfected my very British accent and can do Shakespeare, with no problems whatsoever. And I've been singing since I was a child, so musicals was a perfect choice. And I was out doing tours and cruise ships. And one of the reasons why I did that was because I had left my mother, but of course, I was doing self-harm to myself. So I was living with a man in London who abused me physically, sexually, and mentally. So he was continuing what my mother had been doing to me and to herself, and also what I had been doing to myself. And when I was out on a tour on a cruise ship, I fell ill. I developed a form of arthritis, and it went from being well one day to boom, almost like crashing and burning. So the last 2 weeks of my contract on board, I was signed off sick, and no one knew what was wrong with me. Like no one. I was sent to different specialists, but no one put the dots together. Not until several months later when I was back in London, and someone sent me to a rheumatologist. And this rheumatologist said to me, "Oh, you're lucky because you have one of these arthritis illnesses that will self-heal. So in about 6 months, you'll be fine." And I was like, oh my goodness, I was counting 6 months thinking, oh yeah, it started then. Oh, I'll be good again in January. And of course, that didn't happen. Instead, I just had a huge flare up whilst celebrating Christmas on my own in London. My flatmates were gone. I had left that dysfunctional relationship, which was great, but I was still alone, you know? And suddenly this flare up came out of nowhere and bit me everywhere. And I seriously wanted to die. And I phoned my mother, and I didn't dare ask for help outright. I wanted her to hear my plea for help. But she didn't. She made it into a blame, like, oh, that whole arthritis thing, that inflammatory illness thing, that comes from your father's side. That has nothing to do with me. So we hung up. And then I phoned my dad, thinking, he too has had spouts of um, inflammatory illnesses. So he will understand. No, no, no. Then he started crying because he remembered what it was like when his illness started. So I was left alone again. And I just hung up, and I thought, this is the low point. I can't be on stage anymore. This probably means that, this illness won't go away in January. And I was booked. I had a budding career and I was heading into doing things. But no, so everything just came to a halt. And that was a low, super low point in my life. And I was sat there alone in this cold London flat. And I tried to open the window thinking, I'm going to bite through the pain that I was feeling, emotional, but also physical pain. Like it was really hard to move and to breathe, and just end it. I sod it. I don't care if people say that I'm giving up. I'm giving up. I'm checking out. And the window wouldn't open. It was frozen shut because it was winter. And of course, I just sat on the floor, and I'm laughing today. And I'm not laughing at everyone who has ever been at that low, because it's real at that time and you don't see a way out. And when
Yep.
that bloody window wouldn't open and I just couldn't end it, I sat on the floor thinking, what do I do now then? I'm in so much pain, I can hardly move. Um, but of course, from that point on, the following day, even though it was Christmas, my rheumatologist, her secretary phoned. I'd left a very stressed out, crying, tearful message on the answering machine, and she heard it. She was in checking something and she heard it by accident. It was Christmas. No one was supposed to be in the clinic, but she heard it. She phoned me and she said, I'll book you in for tomorrow. And suddenly there was the tiny, tiny light at the end of that tunnel. And she brought me back, and the medication was changed and blah, blah, blah. So fast forward a few years, and I'm on medication, but I'm back to being able to move. Like I regained some function in my body, and I wasn't in constant pain. But I was no longer working with my arts. I was doing, because I dug out all of my savings. Like I was on my own sick leave, with my own savings. So I was working in a stressful business environment. And one day I just thought, why am I in London again? I was here because I wanted to do theatre and to be an actress and to sing. And now I don't even have time to go and watch my friends' plays because I'm busy working in this environment that I have no idea how I ended up in. But I guess that was the actor in me. I just thought, yeah, I can do that. And then I just found a way to do it somehow. And so I moved back to Sweden. And in that was in 2000, late 2007. And in the beginning of 2008, I realized that the core illness that I'd been carrying since I was about 5 years old was self-harm and a very serious eating disorder. And so I'd carried that for more than 30 years. It was a huge identification with a very destructive way of living. And I admitted myself to a clinic and I started getting help. And when that clinic thing was over, I I was advised to go and see a therapist. And with that therapist, I worked one-on-one for several years. Very in like super intense to start with, twice a week and then once every 10 days and blah, blah, blah. But it was through her that I managed to peel off layer after layer after layer of ancestral like trauma and my trauma, and to sort of and realize that yes, I am an introvert. Yes, I'm highly sensitive. So I've also taken on board other people's pain and made it my own. And I've carried that and it's been eating me up alive. And then in 2012, so only 12 years ago, I met, of course, I paused men as well, like relationships. I just thought, I'm not going to do that. No, no, no. I have no luck there. I obviously don't have the radar for it. I'm just going to be a nun. That's it. And, and so, and whilst working in therapy, my therapist one day, we hit that layer that said, I did want to be a mother and somebody's wife. And that realization when I sat in her office and I said, you know, I'm not my mother. I make different choices than she does. And this lady, she looked at me, she said, oh, honey, did you just realize that? But she said in the most kind way. And I said, yes. This 35, 37-year-old woman also. And of course, in the, last minute of the 11th hour, the man that is today my husband walks on stage, my live stage, and I didn't recognize him because he was a normal guy. He's very creative, but he's not a performer. He's an artist and an AD, an art director. So he's very visually creative. And he was kind, weird. And he was just generous and lovely in so many ways. So we became friends, and after a while of going out for lunch and going to museums and never really hugging or doing anything untowards, and he was very clear with how he felt about me. And I said, I'm really glad that you're not pushing me, into anything, but I'm also at the same time feeling a little bit bad because it feels like I'm leading you on and I don't know what I'm feeling, and I'm such a snail in that regard. And then I spoke to one of my best friends and she said, how is it that you can be so certain that you know that you don't like this guy? Like how can you say that you don't have feelings for him? And I'm like, well, I just don't. And she said, but Erika, your past relationship record, it leaves quite a bit to be desired there. So I guess your compass isn't perhaps correct. And she said, have you hugged him? And I'm like, no, I don't want to lead him on. Like, did you miss that memo that I sent out? I want to do everything right and not lead him on. And he said, but everyone has to hug the other person. Your body tells you when it feels good. And I'm like, oh, is that how you do it in the normal world? So lo and behold, on one of these days, I just plunged and I gave him a really long hug. And of course, my body went, he's really nice. I want more of this, please. And the rest is history. And I was 39 when we met. We had our first child when I was 40. We got married when I was 41. And our second daughter came when I was 42.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was, I'm now 51. So you do the maths. And yeah, we're married. And that's not really where the story ends, but it's, how that has helped me with what I do today, because I'm back to being on stage. I healed all the trauma from my life that my body doesn't need the medication anymore. I'm back to being off medication and I can move and I'm pain free. And even my rheumatologist here in Sweden said 6 years ago, she said, Erika, you don't need me anymore. And I hope I never see you in my office again. And so I've learned some really valuable lessons. And even though today I'm not a therapist and I'm not a coach, I haven't trained in that field at all. People that come to me, they either want help with, they're either Swedish, professional, mostly women actually, that come to me and say, your level of English is so good and I need help because my work forces me to speak in public in English. It's an international company and it feels really, I'm just scared. Lots of Swedish, like everyone in Sweden speaks really well, English really well, but it's a different thing when you go on holiday and you can be in a social setting to getting up onto a stage or even here digitally and hold a presentation in your topic and do it in a clear way and to not make any faux pas. And a lot of people are scared about that. So that's one reason why people come to me. Another reason is I have myself suffered a lot from stage fright. And from me, the stage fright came about because I had a narcissistic grandmother and a narcissistic mother who didn't want to compete about the limelight. So whenever I was in the limelight, it was almost like I wasn't allowed to be there. It was really a life and death thing. So it triggered some kind of deep wound in me. But a lot of people, I mean, we all get nervous, but it's a question of how do you respond to that? How do you know yourself well enough that you know how you respond and if you respond differently depending on the setting? So that's really where my theater background comes in too. So today, what I do, I sometimes I just sit in conversations with people that have read my book and suddenly dare to talk about what they have been through. And that can be a neighbor, it can be someone who's a friend of a friend of a friend who contacts me through Facebook or sends me a message and said, I read your book or I listened to your audiobook and you're really brave and I want to tell you this. And suddenly it's like a door opener. You don't have that polite chit chat about the weather, but people go straight to the point, which I love, really. um, and I do still act, and I'm about to do a musical again, which is the first musical that I do now for 20 years because I haven't been strong enough. And now I'm doing a musical that opens in February next year. We start rehearsals in 3 weeks, which is slightly surreal and but fun. So I think next year, what it will bring a musical for the first 6 months, and then for the rest of that year, I have no idea. And it's quite exciting, actually. So what do I want to say to people? Change is tough, but for me, there's only one way. You either embrace the change because on the other side of that cesspool sometimes lies something beautiful. And to go through, especially with the world today as we have it, where it can seem quite frightening when changes happen that you might not have wanted, or things are exposed that quite can be shocking, and this and that and the other, and how to deal with that and to navigate that. You need people like myself and others who have been through that journey and who can say, right now you're in that frozen window moment and you're sitting on the floor wondering how this is going to work out. But let me tell you, it will, because there is no other option, because one route leads to death and the other route leads to change. Yeah.
And that change leads to living a more fulfilled life.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
It,
Exactly.
and I like what you said in the beginning, that you weren't going to go into much detail about the younger years because they weren't that important. And it's true. That's what I kind of wish, that people who are in the midst of the struggle, that the work is worth it, because it's like when you're swimming in it, it's that's all you see. That's all you're able
Yeah.
to see. But when
Yes.
you get to the other side, then it's funny how the story is important, and it helped you be who you are and who you become. But then at the same time, it becomes unimportant.
Yeah, exactly.
And
It
I
shapes
heard that.
you, and
Yeah.
yeah. But I think with the tricky point with being with being on this planet and on this earth right now is that our minds, our brains, super fantastic computer, by the way, this, but it is a computer, so it takes in the information that we tell the brain is important to us. So we reconfirm our patterns on a daily basis. And unfortunately, if you're not aware of that so that you can start making conscious changes, and it doesn't have to be much. I love the analogy that I think it probably comes from Tony Robbins, or maybe he's stolen it from somebody else, but I know that he uses it. That imagine a huge freight ship. And to make a huge change, you only have to turn the dial a tiny bit and then allow for that ship to turn. But it will take time, right? Before the entire ship has shifted that tiny notch. And it's so much more efficient to set a tiny change and stick with that tiny change for a year. And because chances are that tiny change, even after a month, you're doing it, you've rewired your brain and you've done another tiny change without even thinking about it. But when you say you're going to change everything in your life and you give it 6 months, you're setting yourself up for failure, really. Um, but yeah, so I think if you're not conscious about it, then only catastrophic events will force you to reevaluate how you use your brain. And it's either getting sick or being in the same pattern over and over again, like me, with the whole destructiveness with first my mother, then myself, then that man. When you start thinking, why does this keep on happening to me? Well, you've wired yourself in such a way that you attract it.
Well, and I
And it
liked
sounds
what
so
you said at
woo-woo, but it's
first
yeah,
when you met this new art director,
yeah.
because this is an important point. You weren't necessarily attracted to him in that romantic way that you were accustomed to.
Exactly. He
And
was a
that's
he
go
was
ahead.
different. So you
Yeah.
don't yeah, I didn't that's why I say I didn't recognize him at all. He was just someone that didn't leave the stage. And that too shows what kind of good person he was, because he saw gold in me and he thought, "Oh, I'm not going to let that gold go. I'm not going to do that. She's great. I really like her." Whereas guys previous, if I hadn't given them, I don't know, my little finger, they would have run off
Right.
to find someone who would give them a hand. And they
That's
were the bad
such
guys.
an important point because I mean myself in my younger years, and then when I see young women now, you know, when they compromise themselves because they think the man's going to leave, that should be a huge red flag. Like,
Yeah.
let them, let
Yes.
them. They're
Yeah.
doing you a favor.
Oh gosh, absolutely. And it's so interesting because I watch my daughters, they're now 9 and 11, and they are so much more mature than their years. They're both sort of tweenies, even though they're not teenagers yet, but they are there. They're very intelligent, they're very creative. And we held off, me and my husband, we held off giving them mobile phones. We don't have an iPad in the house. And so the oldest was 10 when she got her mobile phone, and the youngest one this summer, so 9.5, she was, so nearly 10. And I just think it's still such a fight. Even though they haven't had it for that long a time, it's like these devices are wired to, speaking of the brain, to kidnap your brain. And of course, all they see is the juicy stuff. For them, the juicy stuff that they see, or the images, or the women, the men too, I guess, the games, and the games, how they look, how the girls and the boys look, even though they're drawn, they look a specific way. And we talk so much about that because, of course, it goes in. It's like a programming that they don't even realize that they're being fed. And they hate the fact that they have screen time and that I'm like a dragon. I'm like, how much have you had? Blah, blah, blah. And once a day, no, sorry, once every Sunday we do screen-free Sunday, and that goes for the adults too. So we have our phones on a desk somewhere in a drawer somewhere. And of course, the first hour of that day, my girls are like, oh, I'm so bored. What are we gonna do? And I'm like, I don't know, draw. or let's do a board game. And they're like, okay. But it's weird. And to think then how addicted we have become as well, the adults, generally, I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, generally would put it mildly.
Yes.
Because it's funny, because I'm an introvert by nature too, and some days the thought of even having to look at my phone because I have this Facebook group, I'm like, no, I don't want to. I'd rather
Yeah.
be outside in nature, you know.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it just I don't know the way I'm wired. I'm just the opposite of the general population. When I go to eat and I'm sitting with somebody, I don't want to, even your phone turned upside down on the table. I don't want to see it at all. I just want to be with you, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, we're kindred spirits. I'm the same. I'm I'm a dragon with my friends. I'm like, what's that on your what's that on your lap, or what are you fiddling with when you think I'm not, watching? I'm like, I've got eyes at the back of my head. I sense what you're doing. It's rude, actually, if you think about it. It's really rude, but we've gotten so, and this is an interesting thing too, because I do the acting and blah, 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 and I also do presentation skills in the digital arena, in the physical room, blah, blah, all of that. And in the digital arena, I just think some of the posts that I do on my Facebook as well is all about, people treat the digital room as a physical room. Would you turn up and sit slouching on your sofa eating your yogurt? You wouldn't, right? You would get dressed, you would get up, you would smile, and you would say hello to people. And people are like, oh, but we've gotten so used to treating the digital room almost like a television. Like I'm watching you, but you can't see me. So I don't even care. I switch off my camera or I blur it so much that you can't see me. And we forget that we are biological creatures that need to connect with one another. And that is one of the beauties of being not a robot, but for me at least, for to be a human being, to be a woman alive, to connect with people. And in the digital arena, we only have two senses that we can connect through, and that's auditory and the visual. So if I can't hear you and if I can't see you, what's the point?
Right, right. It, yes. There's, we could have a whole event just on this and
Yes.
etiquettes and how to present yourself in a self-worthy way, I might say. Yeah,
Yeah,
it really
absolutely.
it yes, and because you can hear it. I mean, you can pick up, even if you don't think you're intuitive, you can pick up the cues by the tone of their voice or the speed of their speech or how they're holding themselves. And sometimes it's just quite painful,
Yes, it is. And I get that. And you as an introvert, and I'm too an introvert that has to be and can sometimes enjoy being an extrovert as well. But me, like you, I need a lot of time away from computers and social media, and I need silence or just hear the natural world speak, like birds and the trees and the wind. I need that to refuel myself.
Right.
And when I'm yeah, when I'm out working and meeting uh, people that are constantly buzzing about doing things on their phones, and the sound is on and it's beeping whenever you get a message, it's for me, it's really tiring. So I'm currently, I have a Facebook group too about presentation skills. It's a free group. It's a private group, so you have to ask to join. Because I want to be like a serious community there rather than self-promotion or whatever. And but at the moment, I'm taking this past week, I've said to my group, and I've also posted on my Facebook profile, like right now, I just need some silence. So I'm stepping back from the noise just to see what it is that I'm actually hearing. And it ties back into the whole thing of what I'm doing next year, because I know that I'm doing the musical, and then I don't really know what the next autumn and beyond will look like. But I do know what I want it to look like. And me, I'm one of these people that I can't, when I visualize and when I attune myself to what's on the horizon, I don't want to set things in stone. For me, that has never, that kind of manifestation thing has never worked for me. For me, I need to be fairly open to what life presents. Again, it's all about that. Otherwise, I would have missed my husband, because to me, he didn't look the way that I thought he would.
right?
So I always need to be open to that life presents things to me that are much better than what I can imagine.
Yes.
But I do add ingredients like more freedom, more ability to be outdoors and connect with people, maybe more travel again. I don't know, fun things that feel right, that make me go, oh yeah, that sounds like fun. Rather than, oh really, do I have to do that? That's an indicator of, oh, maybe clear that away.
That's beautiful. Well, just to let everybody know, we'll be sure to put the link to her private Facebook group if you're interested in learning more about presenting, right? And
Yes.
those skills.
Yeah.
And you do you happen to have a copy of your book that you've been talking about or the name of it?
I Yeah, the English name is called Butterfly. I can send you what it's called, and in English it's only available as an ebook, I think.
Okay,
In Swedish, should anyone here be fluent in Swedish, you can have it as a physical book, audiobook. It's me doing the voice, hurrah, and an ebook. But in
perfect.
English, I think the publisher said, "No, we're just going to do an ebook. The market isn't big enough," which is fair enough. So,
Okay, well, we'll be sure to put that link in there as well.
thank you.
And I'm so grateful that you've been here today. You do feel like a kindred spirit, and our journeys are similar, even though the stories around them are different.
Yeah.
It's getting to that same place of self-acceptance, self-love, and letting go of all those things that don't serve us anymore.
Yes.
So,
Well said.
is there any other words of wisdom you would like to share before we go today?
Oh, let me just see. Oh my God, words of wisdom. Oh, that makes me scared. No, I think in in the performing world, in the theater world, the musical theater world, when people get nervous, I had a tip that never worked for me, which was, oh, just be yourself and everything will be fine. And of course, before you know what you are, what yourself is, how can you be you, right? So for me, that never worked. It just sort of fueled my nerves because I didn't know what they meant. And it frustrated me that I didn't understand what it meant. And it made me feel stupid for not understanding what it meant. So my words of wisdom is not to be yourself, yes, by all means, but to find who you are through having fun. So when you are on camera, if you are starting out, maybe want to host your own course or do a workshop or a masterclass where you have to stand in front of people, like know your topic and then be find things that can be silly, that you can laugh about and play around with filters. One of the good things about being a mother is that my oldest daughter, she said, oh, can I have Snapchat? And I'm like, it's a 13-year-old, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, we can check it out together because I've heard that they've got quite fun filters. So she and I have a filter game going where we try out different filters and she sends them to me and then I copy or I do others. And she always boos mine and I always cheer hers, but that's the deal. But Snapchat is such a fun way to try out silly filters where you can start to have some fun with what you're doing, because it can be scary the first time you are recording yourself, watching yourself back and listening to yourself. So if you are, starting out, then find filters so that you can use and be silly with it. Like try things on, have a silly hat on or something. Theater is great for that. So find the silly way to finding yourself. And then when you found yourself, then you can be you.
I like that. Well, it sounds like you're looking for the lighter version of yourself,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
not so serious
Okay.
part that's full
Yeah.
of judgment and everything, and just be playing. I love that approach.
Yeah.
Well,
Well said.
Erika,
Well summoned.
thank you so much for being with us today. It's been such a
Thank you.
pleasure, and I look
And
forward to seeing more of you.
yes, and you likewise. And thanks for having me. It's been fun.